I'll say that.
You got a minute.
You just got that.
Mm-hmm.
That's funny. And so,
Up regular session Thursday, April 16th, 2026 at 5:45 PM. City Hall, 3300 Corinth Parkway. View live stream at https://www.corinthtexas.gov/remote session. Notice is hereby given of a workshop session and regular meeting of the Corinth City Council. Call the workshop to order. First item on the agenda is to receive a presentation, hold discussion, and provide staff direction on the capital improvement program.
Well, thank you, Mayor and Council. Tonight, the staff would like to present to you some information on where we think we are on our CIP planning and upcoming projects. Just by way of history, the last two budget sessions, as we've talked about our CIP, you'll recall we've handled all of those projects for the last 2 or maybe 3 years and absorbed those in the budget. And we haven't done a debt sale for CIP for quite some time. You'll recall in those discussions, we have been projecting that we'll need to do some sort of debt sale in 27, 28 fiscal year so we can move forward with some of these projects. And so tonight, we just kind of really want to walk through what those projects are. It's a little early for us to talk about what implications that might have on the debt portion of our tax rate. We're in the very, very early stages of getting information from DCAD right now on values, so it's kind of hard to talk about what that impact would be. We think we'll be better prepared to do that in the next, probably the next 45 days, maybe sometime in June. Part and parcel to all of this, as you know, we've talked about this in the past, and I feel like we have to at least mention it. Leanne's going to talk a little bit about this, but as we've had the last 2 or 3 legislative sessions, there's bills being proposed every year that affect our ability and potentially limit our ability as a local government to issue debt for these types of projects. And so we're going to talk a little bit tonight about some of the rumblings we're hearing about bills that might be coming forward. And continue to watch those as we do every session. And so just kind of keep that in mind as we talk about this. And, while on the surface that sounds great, that limits your ability, in my opinion, as a council to address what you need to address with those limitations. But that is what it is, and we'll continue to watch those bills as they gain any kind of momentum. So that's really, tonight is really more about telling you what the projects are and seeing if you're comfortable with those. And if you feel like we've missed anything. And so this is going to kind of be the Leanne and Glenn show tonight.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the council. So as the city manager mentioned, the last legislative session, there was a lot of bills that had to do with property tax reform and then also with the ability to limit the cities being able to issue COs. Now, a lot of these did pass committee. But then, and they were gaining traction, and then some of the floods happened, and then the legislative kind of shifted focus on flood relief, and so these kind of died. So in all the conversations that we've had with our bond attorneys and in discussions in different seminars with TML, they feel that these are going to start coming back and will gain traction again next year. So first of all is the big one where there's a lot of different variations of the bill to limit the use of COs. So one of them is to remove buildings, parks, libraries, and equipment from eligibility. And there's the offset of that is one would narrow the scope where that we could only issue COs for like streets, water, wastewater, and drainage. But another bill actually removes it completely where it says that we could only do it in cases of, to comply with state, federal law, or natural disaster. in a seminar that TML had probably less than 30 days ago, they feel one of these is going to come through. Now, they're going to fight really hard to try to have it that if they limit it, it's only going to be the top one for like parks, COs, parks, libraries, and buildings. So the alternative will be that we would need to issue GOs if we had any of those coming in the future. However, we just never know. There could be some limitations on just those standard core functions that we do of streets, parks that we'll be watching. The next item that they're looking at is right now voters, if 2% of the registered voters file a petition, they can force you to go from a CO to a GO election. They are looking at, currently it's 5%. They are looking at changing that to 2% to make it a little bit easier for residents to actually petition to get something as a GO election instead of issuing COs. This one is the one that I think is going to be, could cause some issues for us if it goes as it was proposed last year. And that is that it would cap how much debt you could issue every year. Now, it is not on your debt service rate, it is the total amount of debt that we can issue, and it's based on an average of the last 3 years of property taxes. So whether they discuss whether it's just your M&O side or combined with the property that we get for your INS, for us, it would limit how much we could issue to about 3 to 5 million per year. So that could really put a cap on your CIP program. Now, what TML is going to look to try to see if they can do some type of population cap so that it doesn't affect the smaller cities as much, and maybe have it where that it's more geared toward the larger cities. But again, only time to tell what actually passes with that one. And then one that I think, this one is probably the one I think that I think has a really, really strong chance of passing. There's been was a lot of rumblings in the last session. Even right now, if you start looking on social media, a lot of what the governor is saying, and then some of the senators and so forth, is requiring that all bond elections occur in November. And they feel that in May, that there's not a lot of voters, and so a lot of turnout, and so they want to push it to November where you have your presidential elections and primaries and such, so that they feel that we would get more turnout for local elections. Now, moving in, if something happens with the COs, currently, if you do a GO and the GO fails, the voters vote it down, then you cannot turn around and issue a CO for 3 years. Now, there was a legislative item that came in that they were trying to raise that to 5 years that you cannot issue a CO. So again, if we were to move forward with a GO, it fails, then that item, you could not put it back forward on an election or even do, on a CO for right now, it's 3 years. Now, one of the things that the state is looking at is that even on GOs, that if you, let me backtrack a little bit. Currently with the GOs, if the GO fails, you could put that GO back on an election the following year or in May and November or so forth. So you can bring the GOs back anytime currently. But what they're trying to change is that if a GO fails, then whether it's a GO or a CO, you can't bring it back for 3 to 5 years. This has strong support based on what TML said. This one's one that's we're going to be watching pretty closely, because if they limit what we can issue with COs and they force everything to go to GOs, then we're going to have to contend with this. And then with this, the only time that you can actually bypass that 3-year wait currently, if it has to do with public health, the disaster and so forth. So this does kind of cause some concern for us. Now, as the city manager mentioned, we're going to be monitoring these. TML is having sessions where you can log in, every 60 days to kind of see where the traction is going. But if you, as I mentioned, if you look at any of the news that's coming out from Austin, they're saying this next year is going to be a big property tax reform year and some issues with the limiting debt. So, any questions before we move forward? That was the bad news. We'll move on to the good news. So, this is a lot of numbers, and so what we've done is put the how much debt over the next 5 years that we're looking at, or the projects that we have over the next 5 years by function. So by drainage, street, and so forth. What I want you to focus on is this number right here. So overall, this is how much we anticipate the projects that we need. So it's about $86 million over the next 5 years, with about 11.8 in 27, and then 37 million in 2027, and then 37 million in 2028. Now, this row here is what we would anticipate that we would need to issue debt for. So for the 2027 year is 9.7 million. We've kept it under 10 million to keep it under the qualifying debt. As you may recall, that gives you a little bit more discount on your interest rates, and so we had some projects that we felt that met that we needed to move forward with. And then in 2028, that's the big year where we would issue 36.3 million. And many of you may recall that we do have some debt that's rolling off in 2028. So it kind of falls in line with the year that all of our debt rolls off is the year that we have one of our biggest debt issues. And then, and I'll explain it a little bit more in the next slide, but we also have some, as we've done every year, is we find where we have savings in projects or interest or something that we can use, and we try to use that as much as we possibly can so we don't have to issue debt. So before I turn this over to Glenn, he gets to kind of go through all these projects. I wanted to kind of walk through what the information we were showing. So this first column, the existing proceeds. So this is bonds that we have that, like I said, had savings or interest earnings that we're able to reallocate to other projects. When you move over to the next column, the fiscal year 27 budget, you're going to see these this summer when we start talking about budget. We'll put those in like the drainage operating fund or out of impact fees or out of park development. So these will come through as supplemental packages when we start working through the budget. And then the final column is the unissued bond. So again, that is how much that we anticipate in order to fund these projects that we'll have to issue debt for. So for 2027, as we mentioned, that's about $9.7 million. So I'm going to turn this over to Glenn.
So I'll go through the projects. Meadowview Pond dredging, we talked about that one with the drainage fund a couple weeks ago. That's just dredging the pond for capacity. Red Oak Lynchburg Channel, that's the project behind the community park. Erosion, flooding in that area. We took that out of the FEMA project and made it its own. Meadowview retaining wall, that came up during the facility assessment. So that was one of the projects they recommended, and that would come out of the drainage improvements. Facility asphalt repairs for Garrison and the parks. That's the parking lots, if you've driven any of the parking lots, and they're pretty bad in the parking lots. Fire stations.
Yeah, just quickly, you'll recall, we've had conversations in the past, it's been in our strategic plan for a while, to relocate Station 2, and of course, we talked about that recently with the whole Public Works relocation project. And so we've put money in there for land acquisition for that, and we've got some spots that we'd like to get with you soon and begin to focus on under property acquisition discussion, probably in executive session. And then the plan, you'll recall, with that is if Fire Station moved, at some point, we need to think about looking at another station further to the west, down somewhere in the Lake Sharon area, for potentially a fourth station. So we wanted to put money in this debt sale for those potential land acquisitions. That fourth station, if it ever happened, would be certainly down the road, but if we have an opportunity to land in the right spot, we wanted to make sure we were able to fund that. Those two items are in there for you.
Knoll Park, that's the next one that's on that list of, that we did the initial survey for safety and age. So that's the next one, that's using Neighborhood Park Fund. Garrison Streets, that 1.7 million is the county project, but our portion of the county project. Post Oak Drive street repairs, that's just the next one on that food grow report that we did in 2020. That's the next main street. We just recently completed Robinson all the way through. This would be the same type of project for Post Oak. Temporary asphalt road for Tower Ridge. That's where we bought that house. Just make that connection to an asphalt road because master thoroughfare plan actually says a roundabout in that area. So that's drainage and everything, so we don't have the money for that design. But to get the traffic flowing, that would be that project. Post Oak Drive, street repair, bonds existing, all different funds would be. Okay, so we were gonna split this project up into 3 years, A, B, and C. So we've actually moved them both so that they're both during the same year. So we probably won't spend all that in 1 year, but it'd be funded. The design for the elevated storage tank that's the relocation design. We already have the major design portion of it done, but we gotta relocate it to the new location, which I'll talk about in a minute.
Cover that tonight too. So.
And the final four, just lift station rehabs. We've put them on a 20-year rotation. So these are just the next ones prioritizing, kind of like what we did with the parks. 2028 projects, I won't go through all of them, but I will focus in on the more expensive ones down here at the bottom, the elevated storage tank, Dobbs Road. So we'll talk about it in a minute, but Stenson, using the Stenson property, we would need to upgrade the Dobbs water lines, and those two projects would go together to get that completed. And then the wastewater line is for the development in the area, downtown area. Any questions on any of the other projects?
What's Cliff Oaks Drive?
Cliff Oaks Drive, it's currently an asphalt road with
Okay.
Ditches, so this would go to
Curb and gutter?
curb and gutter.
Okay.
And the roundabout, that's why Tower
Okay.
Bridge is right
Yeah,
next
yeah.
to it. Any other questions? So the elevated storage tank, I wanted to take a couple steps back. Last time you seen all this information, the engineer kind of went, so let me give you some background history. So currently we have a low PSI area here. I'm gonna check on order in this area, so you want more water in that area. So that's one reason why we started looking outside of that area. Some of the examples, when Lake Sharon broke, this area here lost water. When the SCADA went out, the only part of town that lost water was this area here. So those are the areas that we need to try to get the pressure up. So water age is probably the easiest indicator of water quality. After 3 days of water, 3-day old water, it starts breaking down the chlorine, you start need to flush more, those type of things. So yellow would be the top of the 72. So you can see that this area, you put a tower here because the water age is the best. So an elevated tower is gonna make the water age go down. Once you get chemical treatments required, I'll go over all that in a minute. We did look at Post Oak Drive, upsizing this line, and it gave about the same amount as the Stenson property that we'll look at in a minute, PSI increase wise. So a lot more expensive for not a lot of results. So the existing water map and the places we've looked at for elevated towers. So the orange dots are the areas that we've looked at in the past, and you've seen those. The new locations, we looked at the Haysla property right around that area. A lot of infrastructure would be needed for that area. I think, there you go. So 52 PSI, great location, great water age. We also looked at Riverview area down here. It had the highest increase in PSI outside of this area, but costly infrastructure. All the pipes are small there, so you need a lot of pipes. And then the locate Stenson property is 45 PSI. When I'm talking about the PSIs, it's for this area here, not for the entire site. And with the TxDOT infrastructure, we upsized everything in that area, so it actually made it halfway decent. Cost versus PSI versus everything, Stenson did work out fine. The concerns that we would have moving forward, and everywhere you go, they have these problems. There's not new problems. So you'd have to train the operators on how to cycle the elevated storage tanks properly. Because if you don't, then you're gonna get a whole bunch of red over there in that corner, and then you're gonna flush a lot of water. Now, unidirectional flushing, so once you find out where your low quality is, you just start opening up fire hydrants and closing valves to cycle water in the correct location. Increased flushers, we have flushers throughout the city now. Every dead end has a flushing requirement. We would just put more automated flushers in the area to keep water moving in those areas. Water loss is increased. Chlorine boosting, one of the easiest ways to combat the water aids is by adding chlorine to the water at the elevated storage tank, so that's an option. We could also do construction projects where we're looping in dead end piping. So the less dead ends you have, the better quality of water you have. And then reduce newer development pipe size. So one of the big things developers like is a standard 8-inch pipe everywhere. If they do 8-inch pipe, that's more storage in the ground, water quality issues. So if they only need a 6-inch, we'll go with the 6-inch. We'll kind of change the engineering standards to combat those, yes.
So why will there be a water loss increase?
Because you're flushing more water. You have to keep that water moving, so you'll just be flushing the water. So the water, yeah, it'll be dumped on the ground pretty much. I hate to say those words. But. Any other questions?
So is that,
So where, on here,
Yeah.
where's the location you're recommending?
We are recommending the Stenson property.
I'm back to the
Yes.
Stinson side.
Oh, yeah.
And we just will combat the other issues.
For context, because not everybody was there that night. We talked about the potential of moving it, because when Glenn came to me and said there may be some better spots on property that the city owns where some of those pressure problems might be addressed, we came back and showed those to y'all, and they weren't great spots. They were very close to neighborhoods, and y'all told us, let's focus on other spots in town, whether we own them or not. And so that's what we went back and looked at. But among those, as compared to the Stinson site, correct? Stinson still is better than any of those spots, and the pressure differences weren't that.
So what pressure do you want to maintain as kind of a minimum?
52 PSI.
So 45 still,
So requirement is 35 PSI.
okay.
We're still,
Yeah, so when they design things, they're designing for the 52 to 55 range.
45 is not bad at all.
No,
Okay. So 52 would be ideal.
ideal, yes.
45 is a big improvement from where it's at.
It is currently 42. I thought I had that up, but it's currently 42.
Are these like, is it like order of magnitude each one you go up?
Say that again.
Like seismic readings, for every one that you increase, it's actually.
No.
It's just
Yeah.
45 and 52 is drastic.
No, it won't be, no.
Okay.
No, that's,
So Glenn, will you explain to me again why we're picking Stinson over the Lake Sharon pump station area? 'Cause you've got 52 PSI.
so this would actually be the golf course area up there.
By Crownover, right? Up by Crownover,
Yeah,
or,
right.
there was like the Meadowview Park one, the by Crownover one.
So the way I'm reading your map is if we put elevated storage where our current pump station is, but it was covered up. It was that orange dot where we were like, stay away from the golf course.
Improve attendance at our meetings if we choose one of those.
Yeah.
And they're very clear.
It looked like that sign was covering the orange dot was pointing to the Lake Sharon pump station. I totally remember that conversation.
And we need to, like I was just asking Scott, we need to stay away lift stations. We need to,
Yes.
oh, pump stations, that's right.
Stay away from these two because you're not, you're taking away the value of the
Right.
pump station.
Right.
So I'm trying to love this idea
Yes.
for a number of reasons.
Yes.
Not just because we'd end up using the CoServe site that they got mad at us for not using, but that would be on the list. Are the people who live in the area where they're having the pressure problem going to notice the improvement?
Yes. Yeah, they will.
I wouldn't want to pick that site and then
Have the same.
change it so small that they wouldn't notice.
So when we go out there, so we now know, kind of teaching our people that at 6 o'clock in the morning, we know we need pumps running because low pressure help with those tanks, getting the water there.
Because they're watering.
Yes, just grass here. Everybody waters the grass at the exact same time. And that's every city, everywhere. I do think the site is the right site, cost-wise, and I do think it will work pressure-wise.
You've already done a lot of the engineering work on
Yes.
that site, right?
I have a question that has nothing to do with the site, but it's just my understanding. You said that the water will stay in there for 3 days. So as a city, we don't run enough water to push the water through and,
So it's about what's there. So the water being pumped from here, you can see that it's being pumped out, pretty rapid, changing out. Then as it starts to spread out, now you're in residential areas, so they're using less water, so the water's not moving as much. Then when you get to the corner of the city, now there's nowhere else for the water to go. Those residents have to use that water, or we have to flush. And that's a problem with every city there is. This is our current, oh no, I'm sorry, this is the current one. This is what it currently looks like. This is what it would look like with a tank in that area. At the Stenson property. So.
Tina, are we answering your question?
Surrounded by lake cities,
Why we have to flush it?
yeah, I mean, I would think our city is.
well, except on the
big as
Denton
it is.
side.
No, we use a ton of water at our house.
On that side, you are.
It's just the way the system,
It just doesn't go through.
and it's that way in every city. Every city
We
has
are
to flush
tied
like that.
into
It'll
here,
just be,
Interesting
but
because
we don't use it, only for emergencies.
Okay.
You cannot tie into
About
two
people.
water systems.
you have to have the
The
water.
TCQ tells you that you got mixed water and you need a whole bunch of other
There are
things.
times where it's not
You
moving.
can, but you create a little regulatory nightmare.
Yes.
In the morning, those kind of things.
But if you did that, technically,
Not moving. It's like that.
flow problem.
That's why you see them, the
Yes.
hydrants, save a lot of water. City, they'll flush them out.
What'd you say? What was that?
Well, we're surrounded by different, essentially not-for-profit that provides water
Yeah,
to
yeah.
lake cities. And he's saying, from a regulatory standpoint, if you were to tie in, it's a nightmare.
Okay.
Because then you have to comply with a lot of regulations and probably, and you, I don't know, I mean.
So instead, all those water districts dump a lot of water out on the ground.
Yes, oh yeah.
That's what,
And if you tie into them, they're using the exact same Upper Trinity water you are, so you're,
what's there.
you're getting on top of the upcharge, right? So that's
Just-
where we're at.
it just breaks my heart. I'm so cautious.
Okay, so we're back to Stinson. CoServe should be thrilled.
No, so CoServe property was originally here.
I understand.
Okay.
I know what you meant.
We are going there.
Let's be mildly entertaining.
Yes, okay.
Super, okay.
I don't know, it's been quite a while since we talked about the well.
Yes.
So we've done a lot of research on the well. We've checked the water quality, everything on the well. We have questions, concerns, positives, and a recommendation. So some of the questions, we don't know when the equipment's going to fail. It was one of the things, the well guy was super surprised at the condition of the current well, but the bottom 4 feet of the well is full of mud. So that means that 4 feet has collapsed in on itself. And he doesn't know if it's gonna extend, continue to collapse in, or you run it for another 20 years, no problem at all. The well would be used for shaving, which I love the idea, because then if we get 2 or 3 peak days, we don't have to up our opportunity costs, which is really why I was pushing for it, but we'll get into that later. There's no factors that will tell you if the aquifer's viable, if it's gonna stay. I talked to Sanger last Thursday, and they said that it actually went up, but Highland Village backed off on using theirs completely because it kept dropping during the,
What formation is it in? The Trinity?
remember that. It is the, I don't know.
I don't think it's a Trinity.
No. It's the one above the Trinity. So if we wanted to drill it deeper and go to the Trinity, things would look a lot nicer. It's the one above the Trinity, so it's a little salty, brackish.
It's probably the Biloxi.
Yeah. Yeah, that's why I don't know. Operate, Operational concerns of the seasonal operations, constant training. Because it wouldn't be running all the time, we use saving. You know, how do we keep our guys trained and up to date? We have a high turnover as it is. It would also require groundwater licensing, which we have a hard time getting people water license. Once they get water license, they become more valuable and they can get better payment. Positive stuff is 60 years, or 60,000 a year would be saved in water cost. Water volume, not the other charges, just the water volume charges. It would avoid permanent changes to purchase water contract, which I talked about earlier, and then improves resiliency for droughts and supplies. So during those drought seasons, the 3, 4 day, 5 days that we were worried about going over opportunity number, we won't worry about it anymore. So all that said, the engineer, talking to the engineers, talking to the operations part of it, they all recommend not moving forward, and they kind of pushed me towards that too. With it's $250,000 just to get the system up and running with chloramines and chemicals and everything. For 60, that's a 4-year return, and then you don't know after that how long it's going to last. So I think it's a high risk, very low reward.
But if we went into the Trinity,
I was gonna say, how much?
we license,
We have to get permission to drill down.
that's not likely to happen.
I think it'd be a 3-year process.
Is that costly?
To drill down, yes.
How much is it to drill? I mean, just
A
ballparky.
shallow one is 50,000. So, and that was 250 feet. We're already at 1,500 feet. We'd have to go another 1,000 feet.
Well, I think the,
Go.
Yeah, I mean, they vary in cost. I mean,
150.
this is a lot more expensive because of the regulatory overlay. I mean, like an individual well, we drill those all the time for $10,000 to $15,000 for a residential use. That, that's different, yeah.
200,000 probably.
It's still cheaper than getting that one up and going, right?
Well, you'd still need all the equipment that you need on this one.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay. So that's an addition to,
Yes, the
Okay.
250 that we need now. So 500,000 to go deeper, and the regulation engineering cost associated with that.
well, what would the permanent change to our water contract cost us a year?
Do you know that number off? We have it budgeted. 100,000 for every, 10,000 for every .1.
I think so.
100,000 for 1 million gallons. But they now go up in .1s, yeah. So it's 10,000 for every .1 million. And we're at 7.5. Probably hit 7.6, 7.7 a year or two. Not this year, but next year or the following one.
Because that's the cost that we need to be weighing this well against.
Yes.
Because once that happens, it's done. If we can stave that off for 10 years,
So when
then
they
those total costs are the costs that we need to weigh against either drilling this well down further or whatever the case may be, and I just don't understand those numbers well enough.
So the engineer did his thing was, you would stave off the increase in water for about 5 years. But we're starting to see that we're not climbing as fast as they thought we would. So, even with the increased population.
So not this
Is
year.
that a product of smaller lots unless you are?
Small lots, yes, and conservation, right? You got better irrigation systems, people putting in the hoses versus the sprayers.
Yeah, that discussion, that'll come up when we talk about the operating budget and water, because we found that to be the case. We haven't hit the numbers on the revenues that were projected when we did the last rate study. And I think it is because conservation is happening more, and the lot size has got to have something to do with it, I think.
Okay, more to go.
Any questions on the well?
No.
good with not moving forward with the well? Do you want to do anything else different?
I'm good with not moving forward.
Did we budget for the well this year?
No, we did not budget for the well. We put it in the CIP, but we did take it out of the CIP. So you didn't see it for next year. We did budget for the studies and everything like that last year.
Yeah, because I just, I feel like we're gonna come back to this at some point.
We are gonna come back to it.
Maybe not on this well, maybe a different, this well has too many unknowns, right?
Right. Because it's not deep enough, is
Yeah.
really the,
I think you'd have to dig.
Yeah. Right.
if you want me to open up those conversations with TCQ, I can do that now.
I'd like to know.
Me too.
I don't want you to hire a consultant to
No,
find
no, no,
out.
I would call, yeah.
Yeah, like,
What's it need, what's it
what's
gonna
the
take?
process, what's the cost?
Come back with that.
Yeah.
This sounds like a grant opportunity.
Okay.
It's granted.
It feels granty, yeah. And it's like, I hate that guy.
Okay, so where do we go from here? So we will receive our preliminary tax values, the official preliminary roll from the appraisal district on May 1st. And that will give us a great indication to start running all our financial analysis and forecast and so forth for the property tax side and also your debt side. So that'll happen May 1st. On May 7th, based on our workshop that we had a few weeks ago, we're going to come forward with the public hearing and then the ordinance for you to consider an increase in your drainage fees. And then on June 4th is when we plan on coming back based on discussions today and after we have our rolls and really digging in as to what is the impact of this debt issuance over the next couple of years. And then on June 18th, we'll come back and do the rate study, which will dig in a little bit into what Glenn was talking about on water volume and what the capital projects are going to do to your rates and just overall operations as well. On July 7th, that's a Tuesday, and that will be the annual meeting that the city manager has with the council to talk about just the budget priorities for the year. Now, one of the things that we kind of threw in here is that we typically will come to you in the budget, we'll talk about CIP, and if we're going to have a debt issuance, we have it the following, February and March. So we would be issuing the 27 debt in actual 27. There are some projects on this list. The fire station land, Garrison, that is a 50% contribution from Denton County. They issued the bonds 5 years ago. We need to get moving on that project. Our portion is 1.7. So there's some projects in there that we would like to move forward a little bit sooner and not wait till February. So in June, we'll factor that in and see if council wants to move forward with going ahead and doing a small issuance this year. And if you would approve that, then we would come forward with an intent to sell on July 16th to discuss that. I guess it's at 9.7 million in bonds. And then we'll move through the workshops for our budget. And then on September 17th, that's when we would adopt the budget, have our tax rate, and then also that would be the night that we would receive the pricing and authorize the issuance of the bonds. Once the bonds are issued in September, then that means in October is when we'd receive the funding 30 days after the issuance, and that would allow us to start, making some progress in some of those projects on this year's CIP. So with that, if you have any questions on the timeline or any projects, we'll be happy to answer them.
Any questions? I like your concepts. I think it'd be good to issue before they go into session. And you'll be, you have to worry about some of the restrictions. Okay. Thank you very much. Appreciate it, Glenn.
Yeah.
All right.
Sorry, Glenn.
We don't have anything else?
Not for workshop.
Patricia, if we go into executive session, can we go a little bit later than 6:30? we have to be in?
You can always be later, you just can't be earlier.
Okay, all right. So at this time, I'd like to go into executive session, and we got a couple items to cover, and then we'll go into regular session.